to these startups. So this is a website to look forward to, and DPIIT is the government body that is driving a lot of the government programs related to startups. The median age of founders and employment for a whole lot of millennials, right? Number 3 on the global chart, only getting again up to number 2 and 1 very soon. But first and second are US and China in terms of geographies that lead the number of startups being set up. India is at the 3rd place, right? So this is just quickly some background again for the entire year. Unicorns. I'm not going to go into a lot of these data points. I will leave this deck. So you want to look at any of these numbers, you could look at them. But the number of startups which are raising capital, and in what sectors they're raising capital, and what's happening in terms of their entities getting funded. Again, this is pretty much just the previous year and this year. A lot of it has happened during the pandemic. Startups have been able to capitalize to this extent in the form of being able to be agile in their business, and again have been growing their business, right? So I'll come therefore to our plan for the morning, which is the Startup India trilogy. And then there are the tax and regulatory benefits that come to the startups owing to this recognition. What are the typical entities that set up structures, and then how as professionals who can participate in that journey. So I'll start with the trilogy. The first is the DPIIT recognition or the eligible startup recognition, right? So the government of India came up with what is called an eligible startup. Now this started in 2016 with the Startup India, Stand Up India flagship program announced by our Prime Minister Modi. And where in that particular notification, the government brought out the definition of what would be an eligible startup. So an eligible startup initially began with a definition of an entity which was incorporated not less than 5 years from the date the notification was announced. This 5 years extended to 7 years, and 7 years extended now to 10 years. So as of today, an entity that is set up not more than 10 years before from today, that is the date when you are live, is an entity that would be firstly eligible to be qualified as an eligible startup. So this is the first layer. The second layer is of a turnover which is of 100 crores. So if the turnover for that particular startup does not exceed 100 crores in any one of the preceding financial years, then again it would be defined or eligible to be defined as an eligible startup. And I'm going to go into those also specifically in a little more detail in some time to come. But that's the first pillar. The first prerequisite, therefore, is being recognized as an eligible startup. The second pillar is getting angel tax exemption. Now, the background to this is startups have been raising capital at valuations which are substantially high. And therefore, the tax authorities had an impression that such premium or valuation was not justified, and therefore to tax that amount of premium. As accountants, we understand what is premium. That is the flat price per share, and then there is a premium to that share because it is at that high price that the share is being issued to the investors or to an participating financial investor in the startup journey. So this premium is what they started questioning for taxation under 56(2)(7)(b), and there became a lot of hue and cry, after which the government set up a mechanism to obtain angel tax exemption. And that's the second pillar. And the third pillar is the interministerial board exemption or the ATIAC exemption. This one provides 100% income tax deduction for a period of 3 consecutive years out of a 10-year window. So if the startup is profitable, it need not pay tax for that bucket of 3 years over a 10-year period that it can opt for. So these are the 3 pillars under the Startup India program. Each one of them is independent, is an independent application, but both the angel tax and the interministerial board are first dependent on the first pillar, which is the DPIIT recognition or the eligible startup recognition. So that is the first prerequisite, post which you could apply for 2 and 3. And each one of these are independent. Getting one does not mean that you have the other. That is the most important point of distinction that we will have to drive, because a lot of the perception is that if I have got one, I have got all of them. That is not the case. There are three independent applications. So I'll come to the first pillar, which is recognition as an eligible startup. So first of all, this recognition or eligibility is available to only three types of entities, or for that matter, fourth. You could see that on the left of your screen. That is first a private limited company or a limited liability partnership, a registered partnership firm, and via FAQ, they have also clarified that a one-person company will also be eligible for an eligible startup. So if you are only one of these four types of entities, are you first eligible to get an eligible startup recognition. The incorporation criteria, not more than 10 years since the date of incorporation or registration, turnover not exceeding 100 crores in any of the preceding financial years. And third, which is a more qualitative criteria, is that it must be working towards some form of innovation, development, or a scalable model that generates employment or wealth. So these are their three criterias along with the entity criteria that will mean an entity can apply for an eligible startup. So some of the FAQs that come, is it specific to any sector? No, any form of sectors, any form of businesses in doing any form of startup are open to come and apply and get the startup recognition, provided 10 years, 100 crore turnover, scalable, and it should be a private limited LLP firm or an OPC. What it should not be is that that startup or that entity must not have been formed out of an already existing business by way of some form of corporate reorganization, say a merger or say an amalgamation or demerger, or for that matter, simply just shutting down that business and starting this just because we want to get a startup recognition. So try and see that there is some difference or innovation that this new entity is bringing, which is different from what is already there. If you have been already doing something, and if it's altogether new, then there is no harm in getting it, right? So that is the first, that is the negative list of an entity that does not qualify to apply for an eligible startup. Now, the question therefore follow on is, how will the startup get this particular recognition? So the entire application is fully online on the government website, www.startupindia.gov.in. And this is the website also that I was just referring to a little while back. This is a free-flowing website open to all, and the startup can therefore visit this website, register on the website, apply for recognition as an eligible startup. There is therefore a write-up that is required, or a set of questions which needs to be answered about their particular startup. And I'm again going to show you some of those, followed by a pitch deck and a certificate of incorporation of that entity. So what is a pitch deck? Pitch deck is largely a presentation or an information memorandum of that startup, of what it wants to do, of who its founders are, of what its market size, product fit is, and what is it that it intends to achieve as a business. So it is this pitch deck that is a driving document on the online application for being granted an eligible startup recognition. After having submitted these details fully online and no government fees to this process, the DPIIT will review the application, may ask for more questions or clarifications, also contact the founders because there are some contact details also asked for during the process, and validate whether all of this information is genuine and accurate. Once they're satisfied with this, over a 15-day period, you would receive in your email a DPIIT startup recognition certificate. So that is the outcome in a time-bound manner of this process that will enable the startup to fulfill the first pillar of its application. Again, a lot of startups don't know about this, and therefore as professionals we can advise them, help them on the process, put the application together, and you will file it with their credentials. So here is basically that particular questionnaire that I have put together. These are screenshots from the application. So it's just another application that I have put together, and these are their screenshots. So the first is whether the offering, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, sorry. So whether the offering is a particular product or a service. Secondly, how is it innovative or an improvement of something that is already there? So it is not necessary that your startup is fully unique. It can also be simply an improvement of what already exists. Thirdly, how it is generating employment or wealth. For mobile number, email IDs, your certificate of incorporation, any rewards, recognitions. What is the problem that you're solving? How is it that you intend to solve it? What is unique about your solution? How do you intend to generate revenue, deck, videos, contents, etc. So this is the set of questionnaires online which is required to be fulfilled, and then an application be made in order to complete this process. Again, here's more of those screenshots in terms of, it's also asking for whether you have any intellectual property by way of patents, trademarks, copyrights, or designs. Is it in any way helping in any specific traction stage, validation stage, idea stage, or scaling stage? So at which stage are you as a startup? It is asking for information so as to also be able to provide as a platform more follow-on benefits to you. So that's the first pillar of application. In doing this, I also want to just show you this particular website live as we are at it, and to show you what's happening. I mean, on the home page you could go there and see, but I've just just trying to show you about what's happening. There is about resources, there are networks, there are the whole list of schemes and policies which have been set forward by the government. What are the various programs? Here's the login IDs and credentials, and then they're also here calculating the number of startups that they have given recognition to. So this DP-IIT recognition, which is our first pillar, has been given to 54,804 startups till date, right? So this is the number that's counting. Obviously, this is just the number that have got recognition. The number of startups are far, far more, which means there is a gap of a lot of entities that are not aware of this recognition in the first place and its benefits, which we will cover. But the fact is that they just don't know about these, and therefore the gap to fill. So 54,000 startups have this recognition. I'll come to this 394 number also in a bit. And then SIDBI is the fund of funds, which is a government scheme program that is also funding a lot of startups. So, they've even put out together the ATIC, the application and self-certification, and there is a whole host of useful links that you could go through, and much more to look at on this website. So I thought I'll just maybe help you real time with what's the website looking like, the kind of links and resources that you have an access to. So the first pillar is something that is the starting point to getting startup recognition. The second pillar is angel tax exemption. All right. So this is different from the first. Angel tax, primarily a terminology used for the tax that the tax department sought to levy on companies, particularly startups, that were raising capital from largely angel investors, and hence the term angel tax. Again, angel investors are investors who are investing early in the company, taking some sizable level of risk in their investment decision. Obviously, the startup is also valued at a certain number, and in exchange for that investment, they're issued shares of the company. These shares were issued at a premium because there was a value and the valuation attached to that particular company and the shares. Therefore, this premium in terms of accounting got categorized as securities premium, and there was a section under the Income Tax Act 5627B, which largely said that if there is any receipt which is in excess of the fair value of a particular company, such excess receipt would be subject to tax under 5627B. And this fair value was to be determined by a method, and that method and who could certify under that method was subject to change from time to time. As it stands, it's discounted cash flow method, and from a SEBI registered merchant banker. So this was the background. However, the tax department did not buy this entire logic, nor did it buy the fact of how the valuations of startups based on projections were so high, and therefore started taxing by way of issuing tax notices. This created some trouble, and hence, in order to protect these startups from this form of tax levy, came the angel tax exemption process. So angel tax exemption process again is a fully online process. Startupindia.gov.in is the website. There is only a need to provide a self-declaration in Form 2, and then again show that particular form. And as long as the startup provides that self-declaration online through the portal, there would be no angel tax exemption. There would be no angel tax sought upon on the startup. However, this benefit of angel tax exemption is not unlimited. So on the right to your screen, you will see the quantified limit up to which this is available. The exemption is available up to an investment of 25 crores only. So the aggregate amount of capital that I raise plus the premium, that total amount that I raise, up to 25 crores, I have angel tax exemption protection. In computing this limit of 25 crores, the following three investment types, they're not included. So if I am getting money from these three categories that I'm just going to mention, then those are not considered in the limit of computing the 25 crore criteria. Right? The first is if there's any investment from any non-resident, because 56 to 7B does not apply to non-residents in the first place. Secondly, from any venture capital or private equity firm, which is a SEBI registered category 1, 2, or 3 alternate investment fund. So there is a SEBI regulatory framework for funds. And if there are funds who are investing, then their investment does not fall within the 25 crore limit. And third, of any specified company, which is a company whose shares are listed and are frequently traded, and on the last day of the financial year, their net worth exceeds 100 crores, or their turnover in the preceding year exceeds 250 crores. So if it is this kind of company, then again it is a company that is whose investment into a startup would not be considered as a investment on the 25 crore limit computation. So it is this three that are protected, which largely means that if as individuals, me and you, are as regular entities, if we invest in startups, and up to 25 crores, the startups can take capital from us at a valuation as may be agreed between the parties by following a due process. But the tax authorities would not come and question that valuation, because we have the angel tax exemption granted from the tax department. So now again, the follow on and the probable question, how will we as professionals enable the startup to get the angel tax exemption? So the first step is to first obtain pillar number 1, which is the DPIIT recognition. Unless you have that, you're not coming here. So pillar number 1 is a prerequisite. Once you've completed that process and got a DPIIT recognition certificate, then you could come here and provide a self-declaration in Form 2. And I'll show that self-declaration also in a bit. And provide that self-declaration, upload the self-declaration by fixing the director's DSC, and you should within another 15 days time get an email from the tax department about the angel tax exemption being granted to you. So there is nothing else that they need, no form, no complicated question answers, nothing. A simple self-declaration will do as long as pillar number 1 is completed. And you'll get an email. That email is proof that you have received tax exemption, or it also reflects online on your income tax portal, where you could go and check, and you would see that in one of the drop down menus, you have Form 56, which is, and Form 2, which is angel tax exemption. One is, this is on how to get the exemption. Now, once you've got the exemption, there are certain end use restrictions. So again, in addition to the 25 crore limit, which is the upper limit of the protection, but even that the protection has been granted, there are end use restrictions, which is that if the money that I have raised via this premium, let's say I have raised 20 crores, okay, I should not be in a position to use this money for the following, which are the end use restrictions. First, to buy some form of land or building or a residential house. Secondly, property in any form, in the form of, again, whether used for business or for residential purpose, per purchase. Okay. Third, giving it as a loans in advance. So taking all of that premium on the books and then finally giving it as loans. Or four, shares and securities. Fifth, motor vehicles, aircrafts, yachts, jewelry, archaeological collections, drawings, paintings, sculptures, bullion. This is a negative list of not to use this money. So the third process is to use the money for startups business. It is for which the exemption has been given. Therefore, if any of these turn out to be purchases or investments in the ordinary course of business, then it's still fine. If you're a startup that is in the business of lending, it's okay. Then if you use the money to lend, if you're a startup that is in the business of automobiles, then it is okay for you to purchase and do something out of it. If you're a startup that is in the jewelry business, then it's okay for you to purchase jewelry and do something out of it. If you're in that business, it's okay. But if your business is to say provide healthcare and you're taking that money and giving loans, then that exemption that has been granted to you is not an exemption that will be further entertained. That exemption will be taken away, and then maybe that premium will be subject to tax. So the end use restriction is a critical thoughts to keep in mind, provided the underlying logic, which is that the money raised is used for the business of that startup. Obviously, your business will be determined by a memorandum, your representations to DPIIT, when you gave them their pitch deck in the first place, answered those questions to them, right? There are a lot of things that you're already furnished before you reach here, and therefore they know enough about you to know whether your capital raise is being used for its right end use. So that is the end use restriction that you need to keep in mind and have the startup educated about this. One particular FAQ or frequently asked question that we get here is, what if the startup sets up a subsidiary or invests some of its money in liquid funds for a more pragmatic use of money, and therefore maybe say it is not, those are shares and securities, and therefore will it be a negative exception? So the answer or response here is that by technical reading, again, you are in default because there is no exception to say that shares and securities in the ordinary course of business. However, because we are able to demonstrate the fact that it is for business use, which is that use of setting up a subsidiaries for business purpose, or just parking the money for a limited time so that it's better used in terms of generating returns, can be made as a case to the tax authorities, because it is in line with the overall spirit of the legislature. So I think if that is demonstrated, then some of those smaller technical aspects can, within the larger interest of what is being sought to be achieved, the end use restrictions can slightly be modified. Or technically we are not there, but at least take a more practical and open view. So here's that particular self-declaration required. It is required to be given up on the letterhead. So it's primarily just I, son and daughter of, having PAN number, capacity as a director, that I have received the startup recognition via so and so, and that I will not invest this money in that negative list, and that if I fail to do so, then it will be a revocation of the exemption, and that too with retrospective effect. So this is the declaration that as a startup, the founder or the director of the company needs to give: place, signature, designation, date, time, name, etc. The other fields to provide. So this particular declaration, once uploaded on the DPIIT startup india.gov.in website and followed by a 7 or 15-day process, is an email outcome that grants you that angel tax exemption. And eventually, even in the ITRs of these startups, there are questions or fields as to whether the startup has received angel tax exemption or not, and you can go and give their yes no answers that make sure that the ITR itself captures to the fact that the startup has received angel tax exemption. And hence when it goes through e-filing or e-scrutiny, this element of the entire process is already factored in by way of the ITR form, and technology takes care of it from there on. So that's the second pillar. A number of startups have also got this angel tax exemption. A lot of startups have not yet applied and got this exemption, largely because they are unaware. Founders are not as financially literate as you might have expected them to be, and therefore they may look up to you as a professional to educate them first about it and eventually help them get these benefits. The third pillar now is the most, I would say, sought after one and the least granted one. So it has its demand and a limited or a very limited supply. And again, that is where a lot of our education to the founders, along with expectation management, will have to be driven. So the third one is the interministerial board recognition, or the ATISC recognition. So what this seeks to do is to provide a tax holiday to the startups, which is to not pay any tax on profits for a period of 3 consecutive years out of a period of 10 years. These 3 years can be chosen at the option of the startup. However, for being eligible to this specific third pillar, the startup should have been incorporated after 1/4/16 and before 1/4/2022. So it is during this period only, if the startup is incorporated, would it get this third benefit. You see, the first one had a 10-year window, so that's fine. If the startup is incorporated 7 years before, it will get the first pillar and the second pillar. However, it would not get the third pillar. The third pillar is therefore restricted to startups formed after 1/4/16 and before 1/4/22. It should not, again, obviously not be formed by splitting up or reconstruction of a business already in existence, which is the same as what it is from before, and should not have used the business they should not have bought plant and machinery from an earlier used business subject to 20% of the limit. So these are customary things. I think those are familiar to a lot of us. Now, the startup can get this ATISC exemption through an online application, again, fully online on startupindia.gov.in. Form 1 is the relevant form. We'll again go through that. And after this process, you would receive another certificate from the interministerial body saying that you have been granted this third specific recognition. Now, this third recognition is the one that has multiple follow-on tax benefits, and I'm going to cover those also in a bit. But it is only this one that has those benefits as compared to the first two. This board is set up or represented by a few representatives of the government. They meet on a monthly basis, review the applications that have come to them. There is an agency that recommends these applications, also a technical agency to that particular board. And the board publishes its minutes publicly on the website, again on startupindia.gov.in, and identifies the startups that have been granted this recognition. So it's a fully transparent process. Everything is published online. Meetings are done on a monthly basis. They are minuted, they're documented, and then they're published. So every startup is able to see what is happening at the end, government end, for their application. Now, what are the documents required for this? Largely a memorandum and articles of association, their previous 3 or lesser period tax returns, ITR, their pitch deck, a video or link explaining that particular product or service, and maybe any other documents that the board may ask for. So these are the prerequisite documents on the online Form 1 application that the startup has to provide. Again, startups are not well versed with following this entire process. As professionals, we can help them over here. So this is the third pillar. Now, this pillar, like I said, is the one that is most in demand and least granted, obviously, because it has an impact to the exchequer in the form of foregoing tax for 3 out of 10 years, and therefore the number of startups that have been granted this income tax or tax exemption is only 394. So this low is the number. When you compare that to maybe 55,000 that have been granted recognition, this is lesser than even 1%. right? So less than 1% startups are getting it, which is why expectation management is important. Government is not keen to dole this out to every company, to every startup that says I am a startup. It is to very unique, different, niche and impactful startups that they are evaluating and thereafter granting. So if your question is, I am setting up an e-commerce business, is it a startup? It is a startup. There is no problem. Are you going to get angel tax exemption? Yes, you're going to get angel tax exemption. No problem. Please feel free to raise capital. But if you're an e-commerce startup and you're expecting to get an income tax exemption also for profits from your e-commerce business, most probably, friends, you're not going to get that. Because for them, e-commerce is now the 1000th startup for them that is in the e-commerce business. It's not something that is different or innovative. So we have had, maybe I could give an example of a few startups that actually got. One of them, for example, is a startup that is in the business of social impact, wherein human waste through technology, they're able to collect and dispose or decompose. So they have moved out humans who were, in this field and who would have to deal with such kind of work. They've replaced them with robots who would do that for humans. And the social impact that it creates, the economic impact that it creates is what is of value to them, and they'll grant that startup that particular exemption. They will not grant it to the next e-commerce, to the next jewelry, to the next lending startup, or to the next. These are done and very well. You can get your startup benefits, but not the tax exemption. Expectation management therefore has to be clear. You could apply for it. There's no harm in applying for it, but there is no guarantee that for a regular business you would get it. Something that is out of normal, you should stand a good chance. So 394, that's the number, less than 1%. That's the expectation to be clear about. So friends, first of all, these are the three pillars. These are the three pillars that we completed. First one, DPID recognition. Second, angel tax. Third, interministerial board. The first one, the mother pillar, which is DPID recognition, now starts providing the startup with all of these benefits. So the fact that you're going to have a startup recognition means you're going to have all of these benefits that I'm now going to start running by. The angel tax exemption was for income tax. The interministerial board exemption was for taxation of profits. So those two were more particularly tax related. The first pillar, which is DPID recognition, now gives you benefits under other laws, which is as follows. So now a startup, which is an eligible startup, right? A startup that got this first pillar, that got this recognition, now gets the following, irrespective of the second and third. Those are independent applications and you could take or not take them. The first one is, it is not required to prepare a cash flow statement. Second, you can do with 2 board meetings a year. You don't need to do 4. The company law requires 4. An eligible startup can do with 2. And thirdly, it can accept deposits from its members. Another company, sorry, not a startup, just a regular company has to follow a whole set of compliances to do so. For a startup, they do not know, they're exempt. They can easily take deposits from their members. This eligible startup can offer sweat equity up to 50% of its capital structure, can offer also ESOPs to promoters or directors or founders of the companies. A regular company cannot. A eligible startup can issue an instrument called a convertible note. I'll spend about a minute on convertible note in a bit, but can issue an instrument called a convertible note. It need not have a certification from a practicing CS in Form MGT 7. These are all exemptions to any eligible startup. FEMA, it can again issue what is an optionally convertible note, not available to a regular company. An eligible startup can take external commercial borrowing or loans from overseas and also have relaxed end-use restrictions not available to regular companies. Can open foreign bank accounts and have various relaxations there. On labor and environmental laws, it can self-certify compliance of labor laws. There are approximately 9 labor laws that it can self-certify. There is also a government circular that says that no labor commissioner or officer can visit the premises of a startup that has provided this declaration unless it has supervisory approval or authority. So you can self-certify compliance and nobody will come and inspect for labor matters unless there is reason to do so. Under the insolvency, an eligible startup can get wound up faster than any other company within a 90-day period. It can issue shares with differential voting rights under SEBI norms, and it can solicit investments from category 1 angel funds, which is again a form of SEBI regulated vehicle that invests in startups, and only an eligible startup can take capital from those angel funds. So these are, and there's another slide coming, but first to just capture these are the entire sets of benefits available to an eligible startup. Pillar 1. Convertible notes, I was going to spend a minute on, is an instrument that a startup can raise money by way of loan and have an obligation to either return the money or convert that into shares of the company. So at an early stage where valuation discovery is not something that is feasible, but there is a need for capital. The capital can be taken as loan. It can therefore be converted to equity based on commercially agreed valuations. Or if the eventual business does not succeed, then there is an option for even it to be repaid. And this convertible note is an exemption from all of these tedious compliances with respect to loans that a startup would otherwise have to follow in order to take a loan from any third party, right? A company cannot take a loan from a regular person unless it's a member or a director, but through convertible notes, it can do that. A loan that can convert to equity or be repaid. So just now, coming back and completing the benefit cycle, the next is on intellectual property. So an eligible startup can apply for patents at a subsidized cost, which is almost an 80% rebate, apply for trademarks, and its applications for intellectual property would be fast-tracked. On the government e-marketplace portal or the GEM portal, which is on government tenders, startups have a benefit to get listed. They need not provide the earnest money deposit or the minimum deposit required to be participating in tenders. They need not fulfill the minimum prior experience or turnover criteria. So if they're a startup, an eligible startup, you have a right to participate in public procurement tenders, again with benefits of the DPIIT recognition. Under income tax, you could apply for angel tax exemption. We already spoke. You could get the ATISC deduction, the interministerial board. We already spoke. You could get ESOP tax deferment, capital gains set off and carry forward of losses. I'm going to cover those also in a bit. And then there are these dedicated startup cells by the RBI or by the income tax, which have been set up, where you could write to as a startup in case you feel that there is something that is incorrectly being handled for you. And from a tax or from an RBI perspective, these emails are quite responsive emails. You write to them, you could get your issues resolved. So there are these innumerable and only increasing set of benefits being added to being recognized simply as a startup, the first pillar. Okay, now this is more particularly to income tax, and again, as chartered accountants, we understand this obviously much better as compared to the others. The important aspect here again is expectation management and a little finer understanding of how the benefit comes. These benefits are available to only that startup which has received the interministerial board exemption. So except angel tax being the independent second pillar, the serial number 1, 3, 4, and 5 that you see on screen, these are available to only the interministerial board recognized startup, which is pillar 3, and which is therefore the 394 or 395 startups, right? So the universe of startups enjoying this benefit is very few. The number of startups that are being granted are also very few. That is what it is as it stands today. A lot of representation is being made to provide the benefit to more number of startups, increase that 395 number to 3,000, 5,000, 7,000, 10,000. So government's working on increasing that base. But till that happens, serial number 1, 3, 4, and 5 are only to the 80 IAC startups, only to startups that have the third pillar. So anyway, what is the benefit that is happening there? The first is ESOP tax deferment. If a startup has interministerial board recognition and there are stock options granted to employees, ESOP is a tax that is usually levied at the time of exercise of the stock option, right? So when there is the stock option which is getting exercised, it is the tax that is levied at that stage, and maybe it is a startup that does not have liquidity in order to be able to sell the stock, monetize, make money, and pay the tax. Right? It is a situation where tax is on an illiquid event, causes a lot of grievance to startups, and therefore the government has come out to say, okay, fine, we will not tax it at that exercise. We will defer the tax for a period of 5 years, or if you leave the company, or if you sell the stock, whichever is earlier. So this benefit is available to the startup to say that we will not, to the startup's employees or the person who has been granted stock option, that we will not tax you at the time of exercise. We give you a 5-year period, or leaving the company, or a sale of your stock, whichever happens earlier, being the situation for taxation or deferment of tax. Angel tax we already covered. Capital gains tax is if there is a sale of residential property, and if that residential property proceeds are invested into an 80 ISE startup, then the capital gains arising on sale of residential property could be subject to tax exemption under 54 GB being the specific section. And there is another section 54EE, which says that if capital gains are invested in units of specific funds that are to be notified by the government, and again that capital gains would be exempt from tax. However, no notification as of now has come for this set of funds. So as of today, there is a section which is notified, but it is inoperative because we do not have a list of notified funds. Once or whenever that list comes through, then capital gains exemption, if invested in those funds, will also be subject to tax exemption. Set off and carry forward of losses, and again critical one. In any private limited company or usual normal private limited, change in shareholding by more than 51% would trigger change in control, and therefore would trigger that any previous losses would not be subject to set off and carry forward going forward. However, if it's an 80 ISE startup, this condition does not apply. Therefore, even if the shareholding changes by more than 51%, as long as shareholders who were shareholders before continue to be shareholders in the company today, the tax can be carried forward and set off. So that particular relaxation is being given because startups, by virtue of raising capital, see constant change in capital structure, and change of more than 51% nevertheless happens sooner rather than later. And just because they've been raising capital, they should not be held against the fact that there is actually a change in control. There is no change in control. It's primarily still the founder running the business, but it's just more investors are participating in the company. So therefore, that benefit is given to startups where they will not end up losing their set of carry forward or set of right. They could continue to do so and do that in the future. 80 ISE is the premise that we covered already. It is that if you get that particular recognition, you're going to get these benefits. So this is to summarize what we have captured till now. I think that's going to take some bit for us to absorb. This 34,222 number is now updated to 54,000, 55,000, a number that I showed you on the website. 1,600 odd entities is also got increased, but there is no published number on angel tax, and 266 previously has become 394 odd number that we saw. So those are the updated numbers of the entities that have got this recognition, only to reflect the gap that is there in order to make more of these startups get these benefits that they're entitled to. So maybe just a summary: if it's a startup that has the first pillar, the second pillar, and the third pillar, then you have got regulatory benefits. You will get angel tax exemption, and you will also get all the interministerial board deduction, capital gain, set off, ESOP tax, etc. No, all benefits. If you are only recognized as an eligible startup, you get the regulatory benefit. You don't get angel tax and ATIC. Column 2 is if you have the first two, you don't get the third, and if you have all three, you end up getting all the benefits available. So that is the benefit matrix, if I could so call it, for applying to each one of these three pillars and getting them for the startup. And I can tell you that you never know which one will become useful to a startup. I have had, we have had companies which had these benefits, never really used them because they were doing their own business. But there came a time where they could participate in a government tender and they got this benefit and they won the tender. There came a time where they wanted to take some form of loan, but not have an obligation of company law, or not have an obligation to do various compliances. The convertible note became useful. We have had companies that wanted to apply for intellectual property a little later, got subsidized costs on their application. Company began running good business, got an overseas client, could open foreign bank accounts in a relaxed manner, again benefited them. So those benefits don't necessarily need to come on day one. The startup's business is only growing. So these things might come up in future, and trying to get the recognition then, whether we get it or not, the time it takes to get it back then, these are tail-ended things. Getting it today because there is no cost otherwise in terms of a government fee is no harm to take it. So I think that's how practically we have seen things come to their benefits, not necessarily on day one, but certainly in a 365 or 2-year period, they've been able to take advantage of a lot of this. Okay, so another popular question that you will be faced is, because all of them have benefits, which one should be the one that the company should pursue as a structure to set up the business? All right. So firm, LLP, private limited, I think these things are very well known to us. I have put below at the bottom a yellow colored bar or horizontal line, rather reflecting to investment solicitation. So if it's a startup that has a vision to raise capital at a foreseeable time in future, couple of years, 3 years down the line, then private limited company is by default the option to go for. This is because investors would invest in companies where they get equity or shares in exchange for their investments. They're not comfortable being partners with you in your business because they're not partners, they're financial investors largely. Also, investments have certain rights, they need certain way of getting their capital back. They want to be able to influence decision making in the company should things not work out well. So investors come with their own demands also, and these can be consumed in the form of a private limited structure and with equity shares. So if this is of interest to the entity, your by default choice is a private limited company. A firm or an LLP is not going to help you. You might do it for a couple of years and then you'll have to change, move, migrate, convert, and create more problems. If you might as well doing it in a year or two down, might as well start with a private limited entity. So that's the forbearing thought process of choosing a structure. Let's say, however, that you need not be a company that needs to raise capital. Most importantly for us to understand, not all startups are startups that need capital or need to raise capital. One of the most successful businesses, at least from a startup perspective, Zerodha, is an entity that has not raised any capital till date. It is an entity, it is a startup that has its own journey, did its business, doing it successfully, has had zero foreign external capital. So it's not necessary that a startup needs to have capital. They come to you and say, I don't want money from anybody. I'm good enough by myself. I'll do my own business, but I want to be a startup. I want to take other benefits and I want to be able to do my business. In which case you can start evaluating option 1 and 2, which is firm and LLP. Obviously taxation, you are best aware that firms have a tax rate of 30%, and then you distribute post-tax profits, whereas private limiteds you have post-tax dividend also to pay tax on. And then there are benefits under the recognitions which are with regards to capital gain, set off carry forward of losses, etc. But those are benefits only available in a shares like structure. So those are benefits primarily in a private limited structure versus the firm on LLP, right? So that is the choice in terms of a startup structure to make. There is nothing wrong in having done an LLP for 2 years and then even then thinking that I need to raise capital and therefore moving to a private limited. No problem. No problem at all. There is nothing to discourage one over the other. Each has their own pros and cons. You'll be best able to understand and advise. But if there is a certain vision already in place, then there is a certain choice that can be made upfront, and a mistake in future can be avoided today. That is a limited point that we are trying to drive here. If that's established, make your choice. If not, do what you're comfortable with to begin with. You'll always be able to move to other structures that you want to do business eventually in. All right. So I think this one slide to me is the more I would say the slide that will open up our thoughts in terms of the opportunities as professionals we will be able to engage with some of these startups in. And this is primarily a journey slide in terms of what's happening to the startup when it is raising capital or when it is just doing business, and how is it that it is moving to eventually some form of exit or mature business. So the first obviously begins with incorporation. Somebody might just approach you to set up that business. You'll set it up by a way of one of these structures that we discussed. If it's a private limited structure, then you have equity shares. There are founders or co-founders between themselves. You can formalize their understanding by way of some form of an agreement. Work with a professional to be able to offer a solution to the startup. So there is what we call integrated professional, and startups will need this by default. They're limited on time, they're limited on resources to begin with, right? And they're limited and they have other limitations in their business. Having a professional that can help them tax wise, regulatory wise, little bit of legal wise, or at least channelize it with the right legal partner is what they're looking for. They will look forward and look up to you as their single point of problem solution, at least when it comes to some of these subject matters. So the first is to incorporate. Second is when they move to their friends and family, and what is therefore typically called a pre-seed round. Seed or pre-seed, these are terminologies. Sorry, just give me a minute. Okay, sorry. So pre-seed or seed, these are just terminology. Seed capital is largely the first capital that comes into the company. So it's called seed money or seed investment. And something that comes even earlier than that is called pre-seed or seed investment. So largely this is at a stage where there is no valuation discovery. There is some idea, there is some prototype, or there is what is called a proof of concept. So they're just trying to see whether this product actually works. Is there a market to this product? Are there users that need this particular product or service? So that's what's a pre-seed stage. Usually you take some capital from friends and family, largely as loan with an option to convert it to equity, or tell them if things don't work out, I'll find out a way and give you some of this money back. Not necessarily all of it, because you're not taking as a founder any personal liability on the business. You're trying to do the best business that you can. The success or failure of their business will be driven by your efforts, and it may or may not eventually work, right? That's a That's again a form of expectation management. You should have your founders deliver to their investors. Investors, as more sound people, do understand it, but those who are participating first time investing in startups, they need to be a little more sensitized in terms of the expectation management on the outcome. So that's on the friends and family stage. Again, so you have opportunities to help them with some form of professional management in the equity structure, in terms of taking loans from some of these people, in terms of having an option to convert, in terms of using some of these benefits. The third stage is where things get more active. People have joined the company. There are accelerators, mentors, or angel investors who have invested in the company. They're investing in equity, or what is CCPS or CCDs. These are compulsory convertible preference shares or compulsory convertible debentures, largely more sophisticated instruments carrying more sophisticated rights for a financial investor. Their product or service has been launched. They want to give some form of advisory equity, sweat equity, or equity for consideration other than cash, because they don't have money to give. They can only give equity in exchange for something. So therefore, there are these alternate investment options. Shareholders typically invest and enter into shareholders agreements. There are investment round compliances to be done, filings with the ROC, certificates to be issued to the investor. So there's a lot of work happening at that end. Again, we could collaborate, work with company secretary like professional to bring that one-stop solution. If it happens to be some money from overseas, we're looking at the FEMA Foreign Exchange Management Act. And again, there are a whole host of those regulations to comply and follow. And then there is valuation of security. So as a registered valuer, you could offer valuation services to that particular startup and provide some form of certification over there also, which is a prerequisite in some of these rounds. So this is the third stage. The business grows even further. Now the startup gets what is venture capital, or what is further called private equity, which is column 3 and 4. What's happening here is now a set of more institutional investors are investing in the business. The capital rounds are upwards of 25-30 crores, and they're investing large sums, 100, 200, 300, 500 crore and upwards, right? That's the kind of investment that's coming into the business. You have been there right from day one, right? You are the guy who helped incorporate, or maybe not incorporate, at least came in the friends and family, or for that matter in the angel investment round. You're somewhere part of the journey before, and he's now moved to the next stage where this institutional capital has come. There's need now for more better CFO type or finance services, because there's a lot to manage in terms of the money that's come in. Continued services of investment instruments, continued services of valuations, continued services of investment round documentation, continued services for intellectual property, continued services for stock options, ESOPs being now granted to the employees. They have a good talent pool. They want to remunerate them. How can we set up a right ESOP structure for the organization? So there is a need for that. There is a need for doing all of this for the startup, or it is educating them about the need to do it. Their choice to do it today or tomorrow is a choice to make, and by default their choice to do that would be to do it with you. So I think that's the venture capital and private equity stage. This series A, B, B, C, D, you will refer or you read about some of these things: series A round, series B round, series D round. There is not these are just nomenclatures. They do not reflect any specific event or sorts. It is just the fact that it has raised so many rounds of capital from before. So if somebody is at series D, it basically means to say that okay, he raised actually series A, B, and C money also. So it's a cycle that has continued going forward, and series A or B largely indicates that okay, this is just their initial institutional round of capital which has happened, right? So that's about some of these nomenclatures. A lot of these startups work out of co-working spaces. Obviously now because of COVID, etc., some of these spaces were not so functional, and we've been working from home. But as things get back to regular, a good place to find them is at co-working spaces. A good place to find them is at startup events, startup boot camps, weekend meets that a lot of these guys do. A lot of these investors also need professional assistance when it comes to making investment decisions in startups. They're good at knowing whether to invest or not to invest, but what is the process, what is the documentation, what is the regulations involved in making sure that the investment is protected is something that they need professional help on. The number of alternate investment funds in India were approximately 200 5 years back. Today, they are 700 in the last 5 years, which is a substantial leap because these alternate investment funds are very large institutional vehicles, and therefore the pool of capital is also very high. And further, there has been a recent accredited investor notification that has only further opened up the investment landscape. So there is capital coming into business. Whether that capital is the right choice is an investment decision to make, but nevertheless, there is a need for professional service throughout this entire journey. And therefore, maybe that's just to say that how much of venture capital private equity is yet to come, because these funds have a life cycle between 5, 7, and 10 years. So if they've been set up in the last 3 to 4 years, they easily have a life cycle of another 3 to 4 years more that they are going to keep deploying capital and therefore investing in promising businesses. Finding them, meeting them, offering them some form of help to begin with, and then trying to convert that into service is the key. I also understand a challenge which maybe some of us may highlight as fees in startups, right? So fees is one aspect that we can think about differently. Maybe have an understanding that as a startup grows, you will get rewarded with them. Founders are open to doing that. Maybe these may not be possible in an attest-like function, but certainly in a lot of the advisory and management consulting type engagements, they are open to rewarding you as the business grows better. So there are set of services which we may be limited to, but those are very few. And then there is an entire set of services which is open for us to participate and work with, where you could reward yourself along with the growth of that enterprise. So I think that's one way to participate in that journey. We have understood that to a great extent, practically done it and seen some rewards. Not all startups have succeeded. We have kept an eye open to know that if things are not really working out, we also cut down on the effort in some manner and kind of channelize the effort in relation to the eventual fee we might end up getting for a closing business. An interesting thing to note was in the pandemic, we expected a lot of startups to actually not do well, but it's the opposite which has happened. It is startups that have actually done better than what was expected, and therefore there is some resilience in these guys to be able to at least navigate a difficult time. So I think I'll come back to this slide, and the last one, which is exit. Exit is when they're primarily selling their business. There is some acquirer, or there is some form of liquidation event. A lot of this time, the promoters eventually make some money in the business, and over their years of hard work, set up what are private trusts. So again, they are more of their unique investment vehicles, which they want to do from a succession planning point of view. So again, you can help them over there. You've been there throughout, so they're going to again rely on your advice on how to do some of these things over time. This entire journey, I could say, is a 5-year odd journey, give or take a couple of years here or there. Flipkart was 2010 to 2018, 2019 acquired. Zomato was 2010 to 2021 IPO. So a 7-year, 5-year, 7-year, maybe a company like one of the edtech guys that got acquired very early was acquired within a period of 3 years. And I have seen companies getting acquired between a period of 3 to 5 years very easily, where, some of this has already happened. And we have been as professionals participant in that journey. I think I've just put together again just pointers as to what we could do. This is only a small subset of it. DPIT, Angel Tax, ATIC. The Startup India website has so many programs, has so many schemes, has so many state level schemes that nobody knows about, that need to be understood. They need to be then, for example, Maharashtra has a fintech policy that gives the startup 10 lakh rupees in their bank account in exchange for the costs that they incur. Yes, so we have had startups and we worked with them to get them 10 lakh rupees in the bank. Now, for doing this, A, you need to know Maharashtra had a fintech policy. B, you have to know what is the process on that. What are the costs that they would refund? What are the documentations that they would need? And what would be the entire exercise like? We did that, put in the effort. Startups got 10 lakh in the bank. They're ready to pay you a good fee for it. Okay. So there are many more such schemes across states, apart from those which are by the central government, that have benefits for startups on transactions, doing due diligence, doing valuations, doing some form of tax structuring, helping them with overseas remittances, because they might be businesses that need global tools, or they need tools which may not be available in India. So some form of regulatory understanding of cross-border transactions will be something that is useful to them. ESOPs, we just discussed about them. It's an absolute need. Financial planning, they have raised capital. They have no clue what to do with it. Should it be put into fixed deposits? Should it be put into liquid funds? Should it be put into another fixed income asset class? What do you do with their capital that you have? They need help on that. They need to make MISs, get some regular things done. And this the integrated professions where you work with lawyers, company secretaries, etc., and do a lot of this for them, right? So this box is above the box where you could still offer to them tax filing, GST compliance, and regular attest, help. Again, depending based on what we can do and what we cannot. If you're doing a test, what we cannot do, etc. But there is this entire this box is above the regular box that we are already well versed with doing, and some of these can become entry points to working with the startup, because not many of the professionals are providing this service. Therefore, you at least are able to offer something different, and not just be compared to pricing, because they might be cost sensitive as well, right? Eventually they're doing business, and business has cost, so they take their business call in terms of professional that they're joining hands at an early stage with. So I think there is all of this and more to offer in that journey. The journey is fast paced. It is a journey that has ups and downs. They meet investors, they may convert some, they may not convert some, they convert some, do something, and maybe things don't work out. So there are experiences that come to you as a professional that you will also be happy learning and being a part of when you're working with some of these enterprises. This is just an appendix. A lot of this that I discussed today, you want to find them out easily. You could copy paste some of this into Google, and it'll direct you to the right link if you want specific notifications, languages, or specific references. So I think that's why I've just shared that here. These are a list of the state-run websites apart from DPIT, where there are startup policies, and what then you could do by understanding which each of these policies. Right. So I think this is pretty much what I had to share. I've left some time for us for Q&As, because I want to also answer to our queries. I think it is more important, so that I could share some more if you have doubts in terms of what we could do and understand with each other on. I'll just quickly maybe check if I've missed anything specific at my end. Yeah, on 80 IAC, I'll spend a little bit more time because again, that's some place where there is a gap. So a lot of people understand that if I have DPIT recognition, I have tax exemption, right? So that is not the case, and then they say, "Ki, theek hai, okay, then get it for us." And that is where there is a gap to say that it is something that is not, available to too many startups. It has a limited supply in terms of how many it is of its granting, and therefore we cannot assure to the founder of the startup that we will get you that this specific income tax exemption. However, you could do an application and maybe have a fee attached to doing the application, but we may not be able to drive an outcome on this particular one. So I think that's where a little bit of the expectation management just comes in, because the regular understanding is that if I have this, I have got it. That's the first pillar, then I've got it. That's it. Yeah, sorry, White Hat Junior was that particular startup, less than 3 year journey. It was acquired by Byju's. So something that was set up, run business, raised capital, and quickly got acquired as well. A lot of the capital was driven by obviously geo investments that came in last year. Yeah, I think I've pretty much done all that I had for the topic in hand. I also want to just spend a little bit of maybe a minute or so on valuations for startups, because that's some, again, an FAQ and how it's perceived. That while it's a separate session, and we will help you understand maybe sometime another time how how the valuation thought process is happening at an early stage, not necessarily based on scientific methods. But what I would want to just share is the math. The math is as follows. If somebody is investing 1 crore in a business and he wants 10% of that business in exchange for his investment of 1 crore, then the value of that business is 10 crores. If 1 crore is 10%, then 100% is how much? Unitary mathematics. 100% is 10 crore, which means the value of the business is 10 crore, and 10% of 10 crore is 1 crore, which is what he was willing to give as an investment, or what you wanted to take as an investment, and the equity he wanted in exchange for that investment. Right now, is 1 crore the right amount, or is 10% the right threshold? That is subject matter of discussion and understanding. But it is not so scientific to say that this business is worth 10 crores because there is no financial history. There is no product that is yet established fully. There is not a great execution team, but only a good execution founder. So the qualitative elements are there. It is only a form of generic understanding. That thought process is that if I take 10% or 20% of the business today, I have 80% of the business with the founder to A, drive the business, and B, to also have more people join in the business after I come in as investors. If I as an investor take 50% of the business on day one, I've become too greedy to ask for more percentage in the holding, or 40% for that matter. Then the founder has 60, another round of capital, the founder will have less than 50. Is the founder going to be incentivized to run the business? Did me getting 40% of the business and being a little bit more demanding help the business? It didn't. If I make my ask reasonable, the founders ask for capital, also early capital, reasonable. The byproduct of that is valuation at an early stage. Let the business evolve for a couple of years or 3 years. You have a 3-year financial history. You have users. Now you have traction. You have apps. You have platforms. You have vendors. You have employees. Okay, make some scientific approach to this. Right? Try and use some comparable business. Works. Then 3 years later, you could say, okay, 5 times revenue, maybe an aggressive ask, but a fast growing company can get 5 times revenue. A stable company could get 3 times revenue, right? Or 5 or 7 times revenue versus a stable company getting 3 times revenue. So those, those aspects, and as professionals, we have to eventually translate this into some form of documentation, because that's required under statute. So documenting this kind of a thought process is also something that is acceptable, because finally we are putting together what is practically happening rather than something that is just a tick in the box.
Hello.
For the company, right? So I think there is potential there to understand that space better, understand financial products more better, and understand this clientele a little bit more differently as compared to our regular clients. Most of these guys are technology businesses, they're FMCG companies with new products, or they are companies that have a different idea that is not yet executed. So it is a market that itself is unexplored, and therefore they may be even creating a market for that matter. So, there will be complications in how the business is done, but I think it is a journey that it's worth participating as a professional, and obviously doing our work, but at the same time learning things beyond it. So I think, thank you. I hope this has been useful. I am going to take questions, but before that, sir, if there is anything that I should first do, please let me know. Yes.
Sir, it was a great deliberation. And sir, actually, I would like you to throw some more light on other aspects also. As our keynote speaker, Gadia ji is on his way, and he will be joining in 15-20 minutes. So we have enough time on our hands, sir. So Ishank ji, if you can throw light on some more aspects of the startup, so that would be good, sir.
Okay, fine. I'll first take the question.
And I have one question. Where, say for example, I, Deepak Madlecha, want to invest in a startup. So what are the various platforms or agencies or companies wherein they provide such services so that we can invest? So if you can throw light on those things also, that would be great, sir.
Okay, sure.
Okay, Ishank.
Yes. I will first just quickly see the question, and I'll take your question also, Deepak ji. First one is whether there is a criteria that the company or firm should be registered after after 1/4/2016. So this criteria after 1/4/16 is Abhishek only for 80 IAC. Only for 80 IAC is this criteria there. Otherwise, there is no such criteria. You could get your regular DPIIT recognition as long as the business is not more than 10 years in incorporation and not more than 100 crores in turnover in preceding year. So in general, no criteria. You are happy to do that within this box. 1/4/16 applies only to 80 IAC. Is renewable energy EPC company eligible for DPIIT? Jitendra Bhai has asked. Yes, like I said, there is no limitation as to the type company, nature of company, sector of company. No limitation. Renewable energy EPC is eligible, no problem. Utkarsh is saying, can you apply for angel tax exemption after receipt of funds, say post 6 to 7 months? Answer is yes. You could apply for angel tax exemption anytime. At any time you can apply for it. And also the benefit of angel tax exemption is retrospective. So it will protect you even on the capital you have already raised. Let's say you did not have the exemption at that point in time. There's still no problem. It is retrospective in terms of protection to the startups. You can take it afterwards. You can enjoy the benefits, and you will all of it up to 25 crore limit. Can a private limited converted from an LLP apply for a startup? So Amit, you will attract the negative list, which is by splitting up a reconstruction of a business in existence. Because you will attract this, you will get that unwanted attention. Though your intent may have been that you wanted, you were running a business as an LLP and you wanted to do it as a private limited and apply for a startup. That's your intent. But the problem is that you are getting attention for a negative subset. And therefore, I would request that you do not pursue this line of thought. LLP maybe wound up and just migrate the business along with a differentiated structure to the private limited company.
Video you Just send me on the WhatsApp.
Thank you for your presentation. Okay, Bakul Bhai wants presentation. I'll share this with the Andheri Oshwara team, and yes, we will. They can just share it with you. I will share my deck. Once registered as DPIT, for how many years is angel tax benefit available? No time limit. Angel tax benefit is available as long as you are an eligible startup and up to 25 crores. So there is no time limit. Till you are a startup, you can have the benefits of up to 10 years, up to 100 crores turnover, and at the max 25 crore investment. What is the procedure to obtain IMB certificate and what are the challenges to get it? Nikhil has asked. So the procedure to obtain the certificate is, Nikhil, first of all, going online to startupindia.gov.in, there is a form 1. You can see it as a last point on the left of the screen. So form 1 is the document, online startupindia.gov.in. Now, what is the procedure? They need certain docs, MOA, previous financials, pitch, video link, or in explaining the product or service in any other documents they ask for. What are the challenges? Right. So I think this is an interesting question again, because from an expectation management, what we have done is, what we have tried to suggest the founders is to not be in a hurry to get this benefit. See, this is going nowhere. You could apply for this for any 3 out of a 10-year period. We believe that it is best to apply for this once you have substantial things to prove through a video or through a deck or through documents or through numbers that you deserve that interministerial board recognition, because it's so little granted. By trying to get it too fast and being underprepared or not having enough to demonstrate, your chances of getting it are least. So I think our challenge is hurry, avoid it for this particular application. Let the business grow couple of years or more, get that particular setup that you can show to someone why a startup needs to get it, and once you have that, give it the shot that you want to give it. Otherwise, the documentation is fairly simple. I mean, this video link is one challenge, but I think can be managed. That's not so much of an issue. The rest of it is straightforward, and I think you can then apply for it and get it. Just patience and a little bit of not hurrying is our practical experience in terms. There is no time limit. There is nothing that says you have to apply after 2 years. No, you can apply after 2 days. The question is, what are you applying? Do you have something to demonstrate and show? And if you don't, there's nobody who's going to give you this benefit. Take that little bit of time and then make the application. Okay, I don't see. Okay. Yes, but unless you have it, you will not get the ATIC benefit. Yes, you will not get the ATIC benefit unless. No. The question is whether there is a possibility of a company registered before 1/4/16 to avail ATIC benefit. Unfortunately, answer is no. No. Okay. Govind, valuation startups. Okay. Right. Before that, I'll take Deepak this question on investments and platforms to do investments. There are multiple platforms today which are largely what is called angel networks or investment networks. So there is Mumbai Angels in Mumbai. There is Let's Venture. There is Angel Lists. There is IPV. There is Venture Catalyst. There is IB Hubs. There are quite a few. There are Chennai Angels. There are multiple networks of people who have formed some of these enterprises with the thought process to have common-minded or similar-minded individuals come together who would have a desire to invest in startups. So I think those platforms you could approach. There are events startup investment network events, startup investment events. You could go there, meet, interact, and put capital. I think that those are some common ways to start making investments. Obviously, all are high risk in terms of the nature or profile of investments, and therefore, investors should take their due caution. Valuation of startups. Okay, throw some more light on valuation of startups. Okay, I have something that is not relevant to today, but nevertheless it's a deck, so let me just show that. Okay, I think yeah, this screen is visible. So I just want to basically show you what's happening in terms of valuation. There are scientific methods. I do not deny the presence of them, and we know some of them also. I just to give names to the. Sorry, 1 second. Huh? Yeah, sorry. So, scientific methods to just name, there is comparable transactions, there is DCF, Chicago model, there is a risk factor summation model, etc. Okay. But I'll just help you with the basics of where we think early stage investment starts. And then once mature, then you have your scientific and comparable things to take care of. So this was that particular example. Let's say you set up a company, only founder was there, and you came in and put in 1 crore for 10% of the company. Your question is, Ishank, why 1 crore, why 10%? First question, why 10%, is the fact that you're investing in an early business, a very early business. The chances of this business succeeding from here to the next few stages are dependent solely on the founder and the execution. If the founder is motivated, aligned mentally, as well as emotionally, as well as physically, does this business have a chance of succeeding, irrespective of however good the idea may be. Unless executed, there is no chance. Your best chance is on the founder. If your ask for percentage in the early stage of the company is very steep, and when I say steep, I'm looking for asks upwards of 30% right at the beginning, okay, 35%, 40%, then your consequential impact is that the founder has the residual, which is lesser. And for you as an investor to eventually realize any return on your investment, you would need either the business to succeed really well without any more money, or it needs more money from a new investor who would participate. And if he would participate, he would also need equity. In which case, again, you're going and reducing the only person who's going to drive the business, the founder, to next to nothing. Unless the business has grown enough, asking too much too early may not be in your interest. It may be your desire, but it may not be your interest. So we have seen average seed round dilutions are between 10 and 20%. This is your average, I would say, desirable range, practical, and has some logic attached to it. So your ask between 10 and 20 is up to you to negotiate a little bit. 10 could be 15, give and take, again 2% being 13, 17 here or that. Take some part of it as advisory shares, take some bit of it as sweat shares, take some bit of it as investments, etc. So 10 to 20 is ideal, with 15 to 20 being the most sought after. Investment amount. Now, so that's the percentage logic. Now, investment amount 1 crore. Okay, so not 1 crore. 1 crore is an example here, but our average investment round logic has been between 2 to 4 crore, seed to early stage. 2 to 4 crore or 1 to 3 crore or 2 to 4 is desirable sum of money to take from an investor to use it, to grow business, to prove product, to hire few employees, to do what is needed to take the business to the next level. If I give you 25 lakhs for 15% of the company, you have no money significantly to do anything good for your business. With 25 lakhs, the founder can't do much. Just be honest. If you give him 7 crores, he has too much money to do something useful for his business right now. No need to give him that much money. At the moment, it is a startup. It is an early business. Its chances of success are not 100%. They are limited. They depend upon the execution. So giving 7, 8, 10 crores very early to a new founder is a high level risk. 2 to 4 or 1 to 3 looks a reasonable sum of money in exchange for a reasonable percentage of equity. Once this is established at that first stage, which is what you call seed round, then let's assume and take this example as a valid example. So the numbers are easy to correlate. So let's say you have taken 1 crore, 10% value of the business is 10 crore, right? And then you come to your series A round where you have now managed to do the business well. And you have got an interest from a new investor who says, okay, I'm ready to put money. I'm ready to put 3 crore for a 15% equity. Therefore, the value of this business is say 20 crore. And your percentage has reduced from 10% to 8.5% because you have made way for 15% to come into the business. So you're happy. The pie has become a little bigger. And the business did well with 3 crores. So reached out to the next guy who says, good, I can put in 30 crores and get 20% of your business. So you are at, as an angel investor, at 6.8 because you made way from 8.5 to 6.8. The series A guy has come from 15 to 12. The new guy is at 20. The founder is at 61. 30 crore for 20%. Post money value is 150 crore. You had invested when the business was 10 crore. Your return right now is a 920%. This is your return on that investment at a series B kind of stage. So what has happened over here is by investing thoughtfully at an early stage, you have been able to hold 6.8%, right? You were at 10, you are at 6.8 right now in a larger business where the worth of your investment from 1 crore has become 10.2 crores and you're looking at a possible exit event after this, where you would have multiplied your investment, right? This against an ask of 40% would have meant that the founder would have been less than 20%. You may not see the business is mentally aligned to grow if the founder is not aligned in terms of the overall thought process. And just one example of this is, for example, Ola has raised 17 rounds of capital, raised totally 15,000 crores till date, and its last value is at 42,000 crores, right? The founder gave up 81%, then went to series A, went to series B, went to series C at 26, series E 11, and somewhere he's at 10% or sorts, but at a very late stage in the business. And he then has 10% of a 42,000 crore business. That's fine. The founder will be well incentivized to run the business in a prudent manner. And the first rounds of capital were at dilutions of 15 to 20% for some initial rounds of capital, right? So I think that is the aspects of valuation. You can see companies like an Oyo Rooms or a company like Nykaa also having a similar trajectory, and most companies would have had this kind of a trajectory in terms of early stage to late stage capital. Okay, I think if you just want to know from a valuation point of view, there is also enough opportunity as a registered valuer to do a lot of this valuation work for startups. And discounted cash flow method you could also do, and then comparable transactions method. Discounted cash flow method is usually what you need under law. It is difficult to project cash flows for startups and try and justify that these cash flows will actually be realized, right? But take sufficient care in terms of the assumptions as a valuer, and because the regulation requires that it can become a limitation, and it is a permitted limitation to make in the reports that you will make for some of these purposes. And then comparable transactions method is therefore the better one. There are a lot of public databases like Traxen, Venture Intelligence. You could use a couple of more names that I don't recollect right now, but these are databases that are collating a lot of investment and valuation information of startups along with financial information. So you could use them sorry, you could use them as benchmarks to value your business. So I think those are also things that you could use. We have a few questions. Valuation, okay. Angel investors select a startup for investment, and do they expect buyback with a pre-agreed ROI? What are the criteria used for angel investors and VCs to select a startup for investment, and do they expect a buyback with a pre-agreed ROI? On the second part, they do not expect any buyback with a pre-agreed ROI. No, and nor should you offer it as a founder. A founder's objective or prerogative is to take capital, run a business to the best of his capability, ability, true, transparent, and fair manner. As long as he's doing this, he is doing a business, and the investor has taken a risk to invest in the business. There is no commitment to offer any form of pre-agreed return. The investors usually do not ask for it, and the founder never gives it. If he wants to invest, he could invest and take the risk. If the question is, if the founder does something wrong, intentionally siphons money, right, does some form of malpractices, yes, the investor then puts penal clauses so as to say that if that is the case, then the investor and then the founder is obliged to return his capital back with a pre-agreed ROI. In that situation only, in the event the founder takes money and does something wrong, intentionally, fraud, right, wrong, wiring, siphoning, etc. Fine, understood. Run the business well, didn't work, didn't get the target market, tried your best, didn't work. No obligation to return capital, no buyback, no nothing. That's a risk of investment. On the first part, therefore, what is the criteria used by angel VC to select startups for investment? That's a separate thing again. But just to summarize, they're largely looking at a good idea, a good founder and founding team to execute the idea, whether they have any experience previously in solving that particular problem, what is the problem and how are they solving it, and eventually what is the revenue model and unit economics. They were not important before, but they have become important now. What are the unit economics to the business so that they could eventually start making money? If not now, then at scale for sure. So that is largely the criteria that they would use to evaluate investment opportunities. There are many that come, many are copies of successful businesses in the US or Europe or China. But because the population mix over here is high, therefore they believe that there is a high chance that the product will succeed. Though the user mindset is way different, but still there is a market to explore. So I think these are the most common criteria. They go into much more details of trying to understand what they're exactly doing, how they're doing it, but broadly this is there. Uh, any comment on Zomato valuation?
Zomato valuation is the
No, no comments. No comments. This is an open market, right? There are people who believe, there are people who do not believe, and it is common for anybody or any investor to have their own decision as to what they would like to see as value of a business, or what parameter to see the value of the business. For some people it is users, for some people it is profits. Whether a user base is a sufficient metric to value is a choice the investor has to make, and eventually how we monetize that users. They've been doing it over time, obviously, and yeah, there's a high value to that particular business, but it's listed now, so I think it's market to determine what you can see as fair value of that business. At least when it IPO'd, it was it is at least a form of symbolism, in the sense that there is this which is also possible, right? What was otherwise assumed as that will never happen has actually happened. Now at what value and at what right pricing is market determined. I think it's let it best to be tested by those waters. But if you believe really long term, then you believe that this business can do well, uh, then it's a long term bet for you to take.
but Ishanji, market valuation is managed by some of the players.
But that depends on, there's no there, you would say there is not much float on the stock, right? How much of the stock is available for the market to manage the valuation?
Yes.
Eventually somebody has so I don't know what Zomato's float is, but for example, a company like DMart's float is 20% to 25%.
Yes.
75% is still held by the promoter group, right? They're still trying to manage the 75% criteria. So if there is so little float in the market, obviously the valuation is very high. There is no demand supply. In case of Zomato, you will see float being very high because the promoter stake is so little. It is all investors who are liquidating and selling stock on the exchange, and retail investors participating. So float is very little. Float is very high, and therefore you're going to see selling happening. And then whether you can manage or not, that's not much for me to understand, but at least you understand what is the difference between a DMart and a Zomato, at least in terms of the ability to have stock on the market to influence the float.
Yes, and another thing, what is the application money by the loan? That is also influenced the recent IPOs.
Yeah, liquidity.
No, that is not a liquidity. They got the loan for the applying the IPOs. So don't think that it is the impact of the valuation and the price opening.
Jitendra bhai, I would like to hold you.
IPO is going to 300 times and whatever
I want to hold you, Jitendra bhai. Jitendra bhai, I want to hold you, Ishangji. It is our privilege that we have been joined by CM Manish Gadia ji, the chairman of WIRC, sir. Sir, it is my privilege to welcome you to Andheri Yoshiwara CP Study Circle. A very humble human being, a person who is always there for the members and is working tireless. So, and I'm joined by Drushti madam. Drushti madam, good evening.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Madam. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Deepak ji. Good afternoon. Manish bhai is still on the dais and he just requested me in the interest of time, because there are members who are listening to this very, very interesting session about IPO. I just got a little glimpse of it. It was amazing. So I just said that, if I can just start, and he will just soon join us. Yeah. So first of all, I would like to say that, I would like to thank Andheri Yoshiwara Study Circle for, inviting us over. Because of the lockdown situation or the restrictions, we are not able to meet in person. Otherwise, it would have been a real pleasure to meet in person. But even a virtual communication or a virtual meet is just as good, I would say. So first of all, a commendable job that the study circle is doing. Congratulations to the convener, deputy convener, for the efforts which you are putting in to the activities of the study circle. and for the betterment of the members. I also understand that there has been a significant increase in the number of members of the study circle, which is all credit to the efforts of all the the conveners, deputy conveners, and also all the committee members, managing committee members of the study circle. Because running a study circle is a very, very tall order, where you have a lot of planning to do, and organizing meeting, getting the faculties, and also reporting about the study circle. So many admin stuff. As now that I'm in WRC, I understand the kind of admin, things which have to be handled from the study circle. It's not just about the education imparting. So as we know that in Bombay, especially when we look at the geographical, the population distribution, the demography of Bombay, it is very important. The study circles play a very important role. That's because of the way the city has spread out and the kind of time that people have to spend in commuting. So study circle gives an excellent opportunity to members living in the area to communicate with each other, network with each other, as also meet up and get some knowledge enhancement. So study circle is a very integral part of Mumbai. I would really like to say that this is excellent work that is done by Andheri Oshiwara Study Circle, and thank you very much for inviting me, and keep doing good work and happy learning. I'll just request if chairman could just join us. In the meantime, just give me a moment. I'll just switch off my video for a moment.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, good morning. Sir, good afternoon हो गया sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good
It is our
afternoon.
privilege. It is our
मेरे जब
privilege.
मिलो तभी मॉर्निंग ही है.
अरे
So first
Sir,
time
हमारा
मिलते हैं
privilege
तो बोलते
है.
हैं ना गुड मॉर्निंग बोलते हैं अपन सबको.
Members, it is our privilege that Gadia ji has taken some time out of his busy schedule. A humble human being, anytime means I have means क्या है कि मैं उनके पास गया हूँ कभी भी on behalf of study circle, and in individual he is always there for his suggestion, he is always there for his guidance, he is always there for his advice. He is working tirelessly for the benefit of the study circle, and sir, we are very privileged, and sir, everybody is eagerly waiting to hear from you, sir. Sir, everything is all yours, sir. Go ahead, sir.
First of all, thank you very much, Deepak, for inviting me on Andheri Oshiwara Study Circle. And always I feel that this study circle is my study circle because it is near to my residence and it is near to my office. And I always get a privilege to be a speaker at this study circle every year. And the love and affection what I got from the members as well as the past convener is really great. And this study circle is doing a fantastic work year on year. Depending, maybe whomsoever may be the convener, but the work and the newer height, the study circle always achieve. And I also expect that the same trend will continue. You are doing fantastic work even in this pandemic time. So it's really a great, and definitely WRC is doing various activities. The details are there on WRC website, whether it is a TEL project, solving the problem of members who are not getting article, they can register themselves as placement under TEL. Details are there on WRC website. Whether it is a mentorship program where a senior member can guide or mentor a junior member. So various kind of initiative, whether a coach portal, that what Dosti Madam must have told for women chartered accountant. So we have done various new initiatives, whether it is a learning from legend, whether it is CEO Speak, CFO Forum. So list is long. I'm not going into detail. But I know that working in a study circle is really very tough job. Starting with getting member to enroll, getting his renewal fees. Then फीस आ गया तो चलो अच्छा है, उसका मेंबरशिप का रसीद काटना है, उसका बुक्स में एंट्री करना है, वेन्यू पे जाना है, वेन्यू का पेमेंट करना है, मेंबर्स को बुलाना है, talking to speaker, fixing. It's really a tedious job. And hats off to the convener and deputy convener for doing all this work. And I am expecting a lot from Andheri Oshiwara Study Circle. And I know that I will get the wholehearted support from this study circle always, the way we were getting in the past. So really, it's a great pleasure to be at this study circle. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to you, Deepak.
Thank you very much, sir, for coming and addressing the gathering, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. And sir, we are privileged and honored, sir. We are privileged and honored. Thank you very much. So over to you, Jitendra bhai. You can go ahead. Over to you, Jitendra bhai.
Yes, sir. Ishan ji, please.
No, sorry, I missed where you were last at.
The last one is the do you think that the IPO funding and all this is the impact on the valuation side?
No. I think it is good. It is good for the ecosystem. I think it's something positive to look forward to that is happening. And whether they work or not, that is for market factors to determine. Let it be left to that. But I think at least what is happening for the benefit of a company that has started from scratch, that has thought something different, that changed user behavior in some manner, right? Each of these companies that today come have, for example, Nykaa has made a women's shop online, something that she would never otherwise do. Zomato makes you buy food at home, something they would otherwise want to cook. Today Freshworks filed for an IPO, a company that will help you better manage your back-end operations. So I think these are businesses that have done something different, changed user behavior in some manner, did something good, and markets are a way to financial outcome. I think, yeah, let it get driven by that process.
Thank you.
But I think I've done with most of the questions as well. So if there's,
Yeah.
I think we were at 12:30 also for our time.
Yeah, I just quickly. CA Ishan Shah explained in the very simple way to his startup journey and how classified in the 3 stages: DIPPT recognition, startup, and the angel tax benefit, and ATIAC and the other exemptions, other benefits under various law, and how the CA can provide their services and the educated to the startup peoples. Now I request to our past convener, Dimple Khetanji, to give a vote of thanks. Dimple ji.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Jitendra ji and Deepak ji, for giving me this opportunity. It's my great privilege to extend vote of thanks to our speakers, CA Ishan Shah and CA Manish Gadia ji, the chairman WIC, our keynote speaker, all of us. So needless to say, it was a wonderful brainstorming session. I'm sure each one of us has immensely benefited from the session. So on behalf of Andheri Oshiwara CP Study Circle, we must mention deep sense of appreciation for his valuable insight and enlightenment on the topic. So with this, may I request everyone to thank you.
Thank you, Dimple ji. Thank you, Ishan ji.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Now I close